What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Gage. Welcome to the channel. Today I am thrilled to be showing off my version of the Reasoning Gate deck from the GOAT format of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. So we're taking a time capsule all the way back to the old days, 2005 Yu-Gi-Oh! This is really, a lot of people would say, the golden age of the old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Format where, the decks were a lot slower. The format was still just kind of evolving, and it's one of those things where even until this day, we continue to see that the meta for this particular format shifts and evolves, and it's really exciting to be able to see. But for me, I am just a millennial who grew up playing the game at this time period. One of my very first structure decks, starter decks actually, before structure decks were even a thing, was the Blue Eyes starter deck, and so that is where my love for the game just started. Just being able to watch the DM anime and just kind of, falling in love with the game. And so it's nice to be able to just kind of take a step back, take a look at the history of the game and see how it's evolved up until this point, and to, explore different decks that were available in this time period. And I feel like this one in particular is one of the most unique. This game, obviously around this time period, it was a lot slower. And so a lot of the decks were focused more around, control strategies, and things of that nature. And so being able to, go for things like consistent OTKs and things of that nature were a pretty rare phenomenon. However, this is a very unique build in that it is one of the very few genuine combo decks that the that GOAT format has at its disposal. And so that was really unique to see that this is something that exists even in this time period. And so I thought that I would take a swing at it, build my own version of the deck. Keep in mind, there are so many different ways to be able to play this deck, but, I've just kind of found one that works for me and allows me to play some really cool cards from back in the day. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and hop into the profile. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you're fans of content like this. So obviously, one of the best cards in this format just so happens to be Black Luster Soldier, just a house of a card. You're able to special summon it by banishing a light and a dark from the grave, and it has the effects to target a monster on the field and banish it, or it can, if it attacks and destroys an opponent's monster, it can make a second attack. So this is just really good in this deck in particular because we are going to be trying to abuse some of our really powerful spell cards as much as possible. And one of the most powerful cards, which we'll talk about more in a bit, is Dimension Fusion, which allows you to special summon as many of your banished monsters as possible. So this allows you to really combo nicely because if you are able to banish a bunch of light and darks from your graveyard, you can actually special summon them back later on to be able to push for OTKs or to be able to go for different plays with your Metamorphosis and things of that nature. So BLS is more than just a powerful game-ending card in on itself. It is also a combo extension for this deck in particular, which is what's really cool about it. So I am playing one copy of BLS. I'm also choosing to play one copy of Dark Magician of Chaos, just an insanely broken card in this time period because it says when it's normal or special, you can target a spell in your grave and add it to your hand. So that allows us to abuse a lot of really powerful cards in the deck. The main purpose of the strategy is to be able to mill as many cards as possible, send cards from the deck to your graveyard through the means of things like your Monster Gate as well as Reasoning. And so the fact that you are adding so many spells to your graveyard means that if you are able to get access to your Dark Magician of Chaos, you are going to be able to use your graveyard as a second hand to be able to go for a myriad of different plays. So Dark Magician of Chaos is just a fantastic card in this time period, and this is one of the few decks in which you are able to abuse him the most. I'm also choosing to tech one copy of Fusilier Dragon, the dual mode beast, just as a really good 7. So one of the things that you're going to notice is that you're going to want to try to play as many different levels as possible, just to make it more difficult for your opponent to be able to guess correctly off of something like your Reasoning. And so one of the cards that I like is this monster in particular, because it has multiple utilities. First off, it's a dark, so it can be used to banish off of your BLS, for example. It also can be normal summoned if you need to, because if you do normal summon it, it does half its attack and defense, but that's perfectly okay because sometimes we're going to want to normal summon it in order to get access to something like our Monster Gate. So yeah, the Fusilier is really nice, just as a different level that your opponent has to take into consideration when calling for reasoning, and to be able to use as something like fodder for our Monster Gate or even our Metamorphosis. So, we'll talk a lot more about those cards once we get to them. I'm also choosing to play one copy of Blowback Dragon, which is just a really cool level 6 that you can play. It says once per turn, you can target a card your opponent controls, any card, so that could be monsters, spells, traps, and toss a coin 3 times. Destroy that target if at least 2 of the results are heads. So if you're pretty lucky, you can go ahead and get access to a really decent removal card that can end up potentially being played for free off of your reasoning. So Blowback Dragon is just a really good option to be able to play, and it's also a dark that can be used for your BLS. I'm also choosing to play one Jinzo just to be able to shut off my opponent's traps. As you can imagine, the majority of this deck is monsters and spells, so we do not worry too much about the debilitating effects of the Jinzo. So yeah, it's just really nice as a level 6 dark target that you can play in this deck. And of course, we are playing 3 copies of one of the best Chaos monsters in the format in this time period, and that is Chaos Sorcerer. So similarly to BLS, it can be special summoned by banishing a light and a dark, which then fuels the banish pile for cards like our Dimension Fusion. But it's also pretty good in on itself in that it can target a card, target one face-up monster on the field and banish it. So Chaos Sorcerer is just a really good card, similar to the Blackluster Soldier. Obviously, if BLS was at 3, we would absolutely be playing that at 3, but Chaos Sorcerer is our next best thing. So for we're actually going to be skipping our level 5s, just because you do have the capacity to play level 5s. I've seen people play Air Knight Parshath, for example. I feel like that card is just a bit mid, so I choose not to play it, but you certainly can use it as an option. So instead, I am just going to skip right to the level 4s, because I am choosing to play 3 copies of Sacred Crane. This is just a really good option as one of the few light targets that we have in the deck. Because not only are you able to normal summon it, you can banish it off of from the grave, off of the Chaos Orc or the BLS. But when it's special summoned, the controller of this card draws a card. So just really nice consolation prize if this does end up being something that gets special summoned off of the reasoning. So yeah, this is just one of the best cards that you can play in a strategy like this. And the fact that it's a light really just makes it that much better because it fuels your Chaos monsters. And for the last monster I'm choosing to play is a level 4 in Toon Cannon Soldier, a dark level 4 that you can, normal summon in a pinch if you need access to, something like your Monster Gate. But it actually does have additional utility because we are choosing to play 3 copies of Toon Table of Contents. So the purpose of this play is to make it so that your Toon Table of Contents essentially makes your deck that much thinner, to make it so that you can get access to some of your more powerful cards more consistently, because obviously the Toon Table of Contents adds a Toon, so you could use the Toon Table to search for the other Toon Tables, and then use the last one to search for your Toon Cannon Soldier. And the Toon Cannon Soldier is actually nothing to scoff at, aside from the fact that it's a dark. You can actually use its effect, which says that you contribute a monster to inflict 500 damage to your opponent, and that's not once per turn. So depending on how much damage you are able to accrue over the course of the game, you can actually use Toon Cannon Soldier to burn your opponent for game. So I do think that that is a nice package to be able to have, not only just for its ability to thin out the deck and increase the consistency, but also to have that additional utility of getting access to burn just in case. So I personally like this package. It's something that you don't necessarily have to play, but I'd recommend at least trying it. So, as I alluded to earlier, we are playing 3 copies of Dimension Fusion. One of the reasons that I didn't want to play this deck initially is because Dimension Fusion was actually one of the few cards that was still relatively expensive because it didn't have a lot of prints. Before the most recent printing in the Rarity Collection, this card alone was like $20, which for a rogue deck at best, don't get me wrong, the deck is really strong, and when it pops off, it pops off. But, one of the weaknesses that it can have is things like bricking, for example, right? No deck is perfect, and this is by no means an exception. But Dimension Fusion, having the reprint makes it so that it is much more affordable if this was a deck that you were interested in trying, but just simply didn't have the funds to be able to play it. And it is I could see why it was as expensive as it was. Being able to pay 2,000 to special summon as many of your banished monsters as you can just means that this you are able to go for OTKs so easily with Dimension Fusion. So it is pretty mandatory, in my opinion, if you do plan on playing the deck. But just note that this card has been reprinted and is much more affordable than it has ever been before. So one of the cards that helps to get things going is Reasoning. So I've mentioned it a few times up until this point. It says your opponent declares a monster, level 1, from 1 to 12, and we excavate cards from the top of the deck until we excavate a monster that can be normal summoned or set. And then if that monster is the same level as the one declared by your opponent, you just send everything to the grave. Otherwise, we can special summon that monster. So they really are going to be in a position where they want to choose cards that have the ability to be summoned, that have the highest probability of being able to show up. So it can be tricky for your opponent to be able to call certain cards because, it really just kind of depends on your build. There are some builds that play literally every level imaginable that you can think of. A lot of the times my opponent will call level 4 because I just so happen, if they know that I play a bunch of cranes, maybe we're in game 2 or game 3 and I've already milled a decent amount of my deck, they'll call level 4 because that would be one of the higher probability cards that we have access to. Additionally, level 6s are things that we have access to that can be summoned. Keep in mind the chaos monsters are not eligible for the special off of the Reasoning because unfortunately they cannot be normal summoned or set. They have to be special summoned off of their own effects. So Reasoning is one of the ways that we are able to just load our grave as much as possible. Obviously, the best case scenario is being able to hit a monster with a level that our opponent did not call, in which case we can go ahead and special summon it. But obviously, even if they end up calling correctly, the goal is to load our discard pile as much as possible so that we can go ahead and utilize our graveyard as a second hand. Additionally, another card that helps us to facilitate that game plan is 3 copies of Monster Gate, which says you contribute a monster, excavate cards from the top of the deck until you excavate a monster that can be normal summoned or set, and special summon it. So as you can see, the idea is to always have access to cards that are able to fuel your graveyard as much as possible. Obviously, you want to fill your grave with lights and darks so that you have the ability to go ahead and banish them for your chaos monsters later down the line. And of course, you want to be able to load the grave with as many spells as possible so that if you have access to your DMOC, you can go ahead and use that to add those spells back to your hand, like your Dimension Fusion, which is not a once per turn, to go ahead and abuse those powerful spell cards as much as possible. So Monster Gate, fantastic card, and it is one of the reasons why it is called Reasoning Gate, because of Reasoning and Monster Gate. So for some other utility spells, I am choosing to play 2 copies of Scapegoat. So the main strategy for, in my opinion, is you don't always want to just blow all of your resources right away. The thing about the deck is that, like I mentioned, it does have the capacity to brick, and sometimes you do need to see cards in multiples and get a little lucky off of your mills in order to really get things going. So it does mean that being a combo-based strategy, you really want to make sure that you have access to the combo and that you will do so uninterrupted, as much as possible. And that does mean that oftentimes there are going to be times where you just, the best play is to make no play at all. And in certain instances, you do want to play cards like Scapegoat that can act as a card that you can use for a defensive tool, because being able to get a bunch of sheep tokens means that you are able to protect your life points so that you can, bide all the time that you need to be able to see all the combo pieces necessary to be able to, do your game plan. So this is one of those things where it can't, even though they can't be used for a tribute summon, that doesn't really matter for you because you can still use them to tribute for things like your Monster Gate. But we are choosing to also play 2 copies of Metamorphosis. So the thing about Metamorphosis in this deck in particular is that it does help to get cards into your graveyard that you can then use, to banish for your Chaos monsters. So, if you have Sacred Crane in play, you can Metamorphosis to be able to get that into the graveyard more easily. But more oftentimes than not, it will be used as a way to be able to, combo off of your Scapegoats because the Metamorphosis will be able to get you access to your Thousand Eyes Restrict, which is one of the main plays in GOAT format. So the thing about the Metamorphosis, so I think it's actually appropriate for me to go ahead and show off the extra deck at this time period, which keep in mind in GOAT format, there's no limit to the extra deck, so theoretically you can play limitless amounts of all these monsters. But Metamorphosis can be used in a multitude of different ways. I do share the extra deck between pretty much all of my GOAT decks, so even though all of the monsters may not necessarily be relevant to this strategy in particular, technically they can still come up. So obviously, like I mentioned, with the Metamorphosis, you can use your Scapegoat to go into something like a Thousand Eyes Restrict, which is just a very powerful card in on itself. Really good at controlling the game state, removing your opponent's big monster threats. We are playing other cards that can technically come up. So even though we aren't playing level 3s, for example, we are playing Snatch Steal, meaning that we have the capacity to steal our opponent's monsters and potentially use our Metamorphosis to be able to, remove it into something that we can utilize for ourselves. Additionally, we are playing copies of Darkfire Dragon, just because if there is a monster that we are going to be able to go into pretty consistently, it is going to be Darkfire Dragon because of the fact that we play Sacred Crane. Additionally, we are playing, even though we're not playing level 5s, we can end up technically stealing them from our opponent. So we're just playing a slew of really powerful level 5s in the extra. Additionally, we are playing, more importantly, level 6s that we have the ability to go into. So cards like Ojama King, Darkblade the Dragon Knight, and Ryu Senshi are just really decent options, as well as, again, you want to be able to make sure that no matter what, whether you're snatch stealing, whether you're choosing to go for, cards that you own that you can actually use to utilize for Metamorphosis. So, for example, if you choose to, Jinzo and use your Metamorphosis to go into these options, that you have as many different options as possible. And, of course, just other cards that can theoretically come up. Most of the time they will not, unless, of course, you are, taking from your opponent or whatever the case may be. We are playing Fusilier, for example, but, a lot of the times these are not going to come up unless you end up snatch stealing or something along those lines. But the point being that Metamorphosis is just really good at being able to combo with cards like Snatch Steal, as well as with your own monsters and the Scapegoat. So that is one thing that you want to keep in mind with the Metamorphosis. And of course, we're just also playing a suite of really good spells in general. GOAT format is known for Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity, so you definitely don't want to be caught lacking and not playing these cards. Graceful Charity in particular being really good at loading the grave with, the lights and darks necessary, or, cards that you can end up getting back later. I'm also choosing to tech one copy of Card Destruction. Now, this technically can be a double-edged sword, because obviously your opponent could be playing a chaos strategy or a strategy that takes advantage of their discard pile as well. But sometimes you just need it, right? There are going to be moments where you brick, and so being able to refresh your hand to be able to make it so that you can play the game is something that I want to make sure I have access to. And so because we are a combo strategy, we want to make sure that our combo goes off. So over time, once we have accrued everything necessary, we can go ahead and mass remove our opponent's spells and traps by using Heavy Storm and Giant Trunade. Just to make it so that, if you do just so happen to play into a bunch of back row, but you have all the combo necessary to be able to, go for an OTK, that you are able to do so unimpeded. And these are just the best cards at being able to ensure that that happens. We're also playing one copy of Monster Reincarnation, discarding a card to add a monster from the graveyard to your hand. That's just really good. Obviously, if we've loaded the graveyard up until this point, and we already have pretty much, all of the monsters that we need, discarding a card that might be dead in our hand to be able to grab one of those monsters, maybe a Chaos monster, for example, is going to be really good. Just to be able to make sure that we continuously have recursion, because again, the graveyard is going to be our second hand, and Monster Reincarnation is one of the cards that allows us to utilize that the discard pile in that way. I'm also choosing to play Premature Burial. Again, just a premier card because of the fact that it gives you the ability to special summon something from the discard pile. So again, you're going to be milling so many cards. You're going to have a lot of monsters in the graveyard. And, just being able to use this to grab something like your Jinzo, to be able to grab your Sacred Crane, which will trigger its ability to draw you a card. It's just really good in this deck in particular. And I am choosing to play 1 copy of Lightning Vortex. So just in case if your opponent does just so happen to go wide, it's nice to be able to know that you have a way of being able to mass clear your opponent's cards. And Lightning Vortex is just one of the key ways in which you can equalize the playing field. And so that's it for the spells. Now, I am choosing to still play 3 copies of the best traps in the game and in GOAT format in this time period, and that's Ring, Torrential, and Mirror Force. All just equalizers to ensure that your opponent isn't going too wide and they are not amassing too many monsters, because again, you want to make it so that when you do finally go for your OTK, that you do so unimpeded. Now, obviously, this is less than ideal if you do end up having to stick something like a Jinzo in play, but we're only playing 3 copies of the traps. I'd rather just ensure that I have access to these cards rather than not playing it, but the thing is, with this deck, you could certainly just swap these out for 3 copies of other spells or even monsters to be able to increase the likelihood of hitting off of things like your Reasoning Gate and your Monster Gate, rather, and Reasoning. So, guys, that is it for the profile. As you can see, this is a very unique strategy, but in my opinion, it is one of the cooler decks to come out of GOAT format. I think that it is really unique. And it is one of those strategies that it can be a little frustrating for your opponent because, it is kind of luck-based. But in my opinion, we're playing a card game, right? So it's one of those things where luck is always going to be a little bit of a factor. And so, you have the ability to, brick just as much as your opponent does. And, if you're able to see everything that you need, then you should be rewarded for doing so. And it's one of those things where you definitely want to make sure that if you are choosing to, play a deck like this, even though I don't have a side deck built for it, you definitely want to make sure that you have options in your side to be able to deal with a variety of different threats in the meta. You always want to make sure that you have things to be able to handle the chaos variants, burn decks, things of that nature. So I've had a lot of fun with this. I think it is a very unique and interesting strategy, and if you haven't tried it, I definitely recommend doing so. Hopefully you've enjoyed being able to go back in time, whether it's something that you've actually had the opportunity to experience yourself, or if you are a newer player to the game, and maybe you just didn't know that this deck existed. Now you can see that, even way back in the day, there was innovation in being able to play decks in many different ways. So thanks for sticking with me up until this point. If you're still watching, you're a real one. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you're fans of content like this. Until next time, GG.